Welcome to the Talk Pod, your daily English learning friend.
Speak English in 90 days. Is it actually possible? Because I know what you're thinking right now. You're thinking, David, I've been studying English for 2 years, maybe 3. I know hundreds of words. I understand movies. I can read articles. But the second someone says, "Hey, how are you?" in English, my mind goes completely blank. I freeze, the words disappear, and I just stand there feeling embarrassed.
And here's the thing that nobody tells you. That freeze, that panic, that horrible silence, it has nothing to do with how smart you are. It has nothing to do with how hard you've studied. And today, we are going to prove exactly why. And more importantly, we're going to show you what actually fixes it.
What if I told you that the reason your English isn't flowing yet has absolutely nothing to do with your intelligence and everything to do with one simple habit you haven't built yet?
Stay with us because this conversation is going to change the way you think about English forever.
Welcome to the Talk Pod. I'm David.
And I'm Sarah. And if you're new here, we talk about real things, real language learning, real struggles, real breakthroughs. We don't sugarcoat it, and we don't make it sound easier than it is, but we also don't let it sound harder than it needs to be.
Today's topic is something that's been blowing up in the language learning community, and honestly, it should have blown up years ago. We're talking about English shadow practice, specifically whether a focused 90-day shadow program, starting with those first 15 days, can genuinely move you from frozen and terrified to actually speaking.
We're going to talk about the science behind why so many people get stuck. We're going to walk through what days 1 through 15 of shadow practice really look like on the ground. And we're going to get into the honest, sometimes uncomfortable truth about why most English learners never reach the fluency they're chasing.
So get comfortable, maybe grab something to write with, and let's talk.
Okay, David, let me start with something that came up in a conversation I had recently with a friend who teaches at a university. She told me something that honestly made me a little sad. She said in her classroom, she has students who can write perfect essays in English, grammatically flawless, sophisticated vocabulary, beautiful structure. And those same students, when she asks them a simple question in English during class, just a simple conversational question, they go silent. Completely silent, and they look mortified.
And that's not an unusual story. That's actually extremely common. It might even be the most common experience in English education worldwide.
So what's happening there? Because these students are clearly intelligent, they're clearly working hard. Why is there such a massive gap between what they can write and what they can say?
So this is where it gets really interesting, and I think this is the thing that most language teachers don't explain clearly enough. When you learn English through reading and writing exercises, you're building a very specific kind of knowledge. It's stored in what we might call your conscious processing system. It's careful, it's methodical, it checks the rules. It's great for exams.
But terrible for conversations.
Exactly, because conversations don't wait. Someone asks you something and the clock is already running. Your conscious processing system is too slow. It needs time to check the grammar, pull up the vocabulary, construct the sentence, and by the time it's done, the conversation has moved on and you've missed your moment.
So people who are fluent, what are they using?
They're using something that feels almost instinctive, like a reflex. You hear a question and the answer just comes. Not because they stopped caring about grammar, but because the grammar became automatic. It got baked into their system at a level that doesn't require conscious thought anymore.
And the way you build that kind of automatic fluency is not through more reading, not through more grammar drills. It's through speaking. Specifically, and this is what shadow practice is designed to do, it's through training your mouth, your ear, and your brain to work together in real time.
Right. For anyone who hasn't heard of shadowing, the technique is beautifully simple in theory. You listen to someone speaking English and you repeat what they say, almost simultaneously. Not after a long pause, not after you've thought about it, almost alongside them, like your voice is the echo and their voice is the original sound.
And when you first try it, it feels absolutely impossible.
Completely impossible. And that's actually a really important point that we're going to come back to, because that feeling of impossibility on day one is not a warning sign. It's actually evidence that the practice is working.
Let's talk about why shadowing specifically is so effective when so many other methods have let people down.
I think the honest starting point is this. Most English methods are designed around the learner's comfort. They move slowly, they explain everything, they make sure you understand before you move on. And that feels responsible. It feels kind.
But real conversation is not comfortable. Real conversation is fast. It's unpredictable. It doesn't wait for you to understand.
And so if you only ever practice in comfort, you are training for a test that doesn't exist in real life. You're preparing for a race by sitting on a very comfortable couch and reading about running.
That's such a brutal way to put it, but it's accurate.
Shadowing puts you in the discomfort deliberately. You are moving at native speed or close to it. You are processing and producing at the same time. You are making mistakes and continuing anyway. And that is exactly what a real conversation demands.
There's something else that shadowing does that I find really fascinating from a physical standpoint, and I think people don't appreciate this enough. Speaking a language is not just a mental skill, it's a physical skill.
Yes, say more about that.
Your mouth has to learn English. Your tongue, your jaw, your lips, they have to get comfortable making sounds that may not exist in your native language. And that only happens through repetition, through actually making those sounds hundreds and then thousands of times.
I read somewhere, I think it was in a book about language acquisition, that becoming fluent in a language requires your mouth to complete somewhere between 50,000 and 100,000 repetitions of common speech patterns. That sounds like a lot, but broken down over 90 days of consistent practice, it becomes achievable.
That number is humbling, but it's also clarifying because it explains why 1 week of studying doesn't make you fluent, and it explains why consistent daily practice, even just 20 or 30 minutes, compounds in a way that occasional long sessions never will.
And that brings us to the structure of the first 15 days specifically, because days 1 through 15 are not about becoming fluent, they're about building the foundation that makes fluency possible later.
Okay, so let's get real about days 1 through 5, because I want to be completely honest here. This is where most people quit.
Why do you think that is?
Because they're measuring the wrong thing. They start on day 1 expecting to feel more confident by day 3, and when they don't, when day 3 still feels as uncomfortable as day 1, they decide the method isn't working.
When in reality, day 3 is supposed to feel almost exactly like day 1. The progress in the early days is happening beneath the surface. It's neurological. You can't feel it yet, but the pathways are forming.
So the measurement that actually matters in days 1 through 5 is not, do I sound better? The measurement is, did I do it today? That's it. Full stop. You showed up and did the practice, you win the day.
And what does the practice actually look like during those first 5 days? In a good shadowing program, you're working with sentences that are simple, clear, and incredibly common. Things like, I'm not sure what time it is. Can you say that again? I was just about to call you. It's been a really long week.
Nothing fancy, nothing academic. These are the sentences that fill up a normal English day. And the goal is not to understand them. You probably already understand them. The goal is to say them at speed without thinking.
And on day 1, that is remarkably hard. You might get through 10 sentences in a session and feel genuinely exhausted. Your brain is doing something very new. It's trying to listen and speak simultaneously. That mental load is real.
By day 5, that same 10-sentence session starts to feel slightly less impossible. You're still struggling, but there are moments, just flashes, where a sentence comes out without effort. And those moments, they're addictive.
Because that's your first taste of what automatic English feels like. And once you feel that, even briefly, you understand why fluent speakers don't think about their words. The words just come.
So if you're in days 1 through 5 right now, or you're about to start, please hear this clearly. The discomfort you're feeling is not the problem. The discomfort is the solution. You are building something real inside your brain. Just keep showing up.
All right, days 6 through 10. And this is the phase that I genuinely find the most fascinating, because something starts to change, And most learners don't even notice it happening.
What's the change?
Your brain starts to anticipate. In the early days, every sentence lands like a surprise. Your brain has to process it from zero, identify the words, understand the meaning, figure out how to say it every single time.
But by day 6 or 7...
By day 6 or 7, you've heard enough English at speed that your brain begins to recognize patterns before they're complete. You hear the beginning of a sentence, and something inside you already knows where it's going. And that anticipation, that predictive ability, is the very beginning of real fluency.
It's almost like your English brain is waking up.
Exactly. And it shows up in subtle ways. You start to notice that some sentences come out before you've consciously decided to say them. Your mouth moves before your mind gives the order. That's the reflex beginning to form.
Something else happens in this phase that learners often miss. Your listening gets better, and this surprises people because they're focused on speaking. But the two skills are far more connected than most people realize.
Because when you shadow, you're not just training your mouth, you're training your ear to process English at a much more granular level. You start hearing individual sounds that you used to hear as a blur. You start catching words that you used to miss.
And learners sometimes report that native speakers seem to slow down around this time, which of course they haven't. The learner has simply gotten faster at processing what they hear.
Think about it like adjusting to a new city. The first week, everything feels chaotic. There are too many streets, too much noise, nothing makes sense. But after a month, the city starts to feel familiar. You know which streets lead where. You're not lost anymore. The city hasn't changed. You have.
That's such a good way to put it, and I think it gives people something realistic to hold on to during those middle days when progress doesn't feel visible. It's happening, it's just happening under the surface.
Now, here's the part where I want to ask a question, because I'm genuinely curious how this lands for people listening. We've talked about days 1 through 10, and some of you have been studying English for years. So what's going through your mind right now?
I think some people are frustrated, like, I've put in years and I still freeze. How is 15 days of shadowing gonna fix what years couldn't?
And that's a fair thing to feel. But here's the reframe. Those years of study were not wasted. You have a huge amount of English stored in your brain right now. The vocabulary is there. The grammar understanding is there. The comprehension is there. What's missing is not knowledge. What's missing is the bridge between knowing and doing.
And shadowing builds that bridge quickly because you already have the raw material. You just need to activate it.
I want to get into the specific kinds of sentences that show up in a strong 15-day shadowing practice because I think this is something people are genuinely curious about. And it's more deliberate than people realize.
Right. A well-designed shadowing program for days 1 through 15 isn't just throwing random sentences at you. The sentences are chosen for a reason, and there are basically 3 categories that any solid program will lean into heavily.
The first category is what I call survival sentences. These are not exciting, but they are the backbone of daily spoken English. I'll be there in 10 minutes. Do you have a moment? I was just about to call you. It's been a really long week.
These sentences appear constantly in real conversations, and when they become automatic, when you don't have to think to produce them, you free up enormous mental bandwidth for the harder parts of the conversation, the content, the ideas, the story you're trying to tell.
The second category is bridge sentences. These are the phrases that keep you in a conversation even when you're not sure what to say next. That's interesting. Can you tell me more? I think I know what you mean. Let me think about that for a second. I'm not sure I caught that. Could you say that again? These are the sentences that native speakers use constantly without even thinking about them. But for a learner, not having them is devastating. Because when you hit a moment of uncertainty, which happens all the time in conversation, and you don't have a bridge sentence ready, you go silent. And silence feels like failure.
But if you have those bridge sentences locked in, you can stay in the conversation, you can buy yourself time, and the other person barely notices because you sound natural doing it.
The third category is opinion and reaction sentences. Honestly, I wasn't expecting that. That's a good point. I kind of disagree, but I see where you're coming from. No way, really? These are the sentences that make you sound alive in a conversation rather than robotic.
And I think this is the category that surprises learners the most, because they expect that fluency means knowing big words, complex grammar. But the truth is, fluency sounds like, oh wow, that's wild, and yeah, I know exactly what you mean, and wait, say that part again?
Short, responsive, human.
And by day 10 of consistent shadowing, many learners have those 3 categories starting to feel natural, not perfect, but available, ready to reach for.
Days 11 through 15, and I want to be careful here about what I promise and what I don't.
Smart, because this is not "you're fluent now" territory.
Not even close. Fluency takes much longer than 15 days, and anyone who tells you otherwise is selling you something. But day 15 is absolutely something real has changed territory.
What's the felt experience? What does a learner actually notice?
They notice that the gap has shortened. That moment between hearing something and being able to respond, it used to feel like trying to run through deep water. By day 15, there's still resistance, but it's less. The water is shallower.
They also notice something happening with their relationship to mistakes. In the first few days, a mistake, a wrong word, a mispronunciation, feels catastrophic. It feels like evidence that they can't do this.
By day 15, a mistake feels like information. Like, okay, that came out wrong. I'll adjust next time. The emotional charge around errors starts to dissolve. And that shift is enormous. Because fear of mistakes is probably the single biggest thing holding English learners back from speaking.
I think about this a lot. There's a line I heard once. I think it was from an interview with a well-known polyglot, one of those people who speaks 8 or 10 languages. And he said something like, "I have never met a fluent speaker who became fluent by being afraid to speak."
And that sounds almost obvious when you say it out loud. But for the person who is genuinely terrified of making mistakes in front of others, it's actually a profound thing to sit with.
Because the fear is so real, the embarrassment is so real, and it makes complete sense as a human response. Nobody likes looking incompetent. Nobody likes the feeling of reaching for a word and not finding it.
But here's what 15 days of daily shadowing does to that fear. It gives you evidence that you can do it. Small evidence at first, but real. You shadow a sentence that seemed impossible on day 1, and on day 12, it comes out clean. And your brain files that away. It remembers. And slowly, the fear starts losing its grip.
And 90 days from now, if you stay consistent, that fear is not gone, but it's small enough that it doesn't stop you anymore. And that's the real goal. Not perfect English. Speaking English even when it's imperfect. Speaking anyway.
Okay, I want to stop here and say something that might be a little confronting, and I'm saying it because I think it's genuinely important.
Oh, David's going honest mode.
Always. Here it is. If you've been studying English for a long time, years maybe, and you still can't speak it freely, it is not because English is too hard for you. It is not because you're a bad student. It is not because you started too late or your accent is too strong or any of the other stories that learners tell themselves.
It's because you've been doing the wrong kind of practice.
And that's uncomfortable to hear because you've worked hard. The studying was real. The time was real. But if that time was spent mostly reading and writing, mostly passive engagement with English, then you've been training for a different skill than the one you want.
Reading English makes you better at reading English. Writing English makes you better at writing English. Speaking English, out loud, imperfectly, at speed, in real time, that is the only thing that makes you better at speaking English.
And I think deep down, most learners know this. But speaking is scary. It's vulnerable. When you're reading, nobody can judge you. But when you open your mouth, you're exposed.
And so people avoid the scary thing and do the safe thing. They read more, they study more vocabulary, they watch another YouTube video about grammar, and they stay stuck.
Shadowing is the bridge out of that cycle because it puts speaking in a protected environment. You're not in a real conversation yet. Nobody's judging you, but you are making English sounds at English speed. You are training the very reflex that real conversations will require.
So if you've been stuck, if you've been studying without speaking, this is your invitation. Not tomorrow, today. Say something in English out loud right now. It doesn't matter if it's clumsy. It doesn't matter if it's short. Open your mouth and let English out of it.
I want to slow down for a minute and ask you something personal. You don't have to answer out loud, just think about it honestly.
Oh, I love when we do this.
Why do you want to speak English? And I mean really, specifically why? Not because it's useful, not because my job requires it. Deeper than that, what is the actual moment you're working toward?
Because I think for most people there is a moment, a very specific, very personal moment. Maybe it's a conversation they want to have with someone they can't fully reach right now. Maybe it's a place they want to go and actually feel at home in. Maybe it's a version of themselves that they can only become if they can express themselves fully in this language.
And I asked that question because language learning is genuinely hard work. The 90 days that we're talking about, they are not easy. There will be days when you don't feel like doing the practice, days when you feel like you're going backwards, days when you wonder if it's worth it.
And on those days, the only thing that keeps most people going is the why, the specific, emotional, personal reason they started.
Because English is useful will not get you through day 37 when you're tired and busy and the practice feels pointless.
But because I want to sit at a table with people from all over the world and actually be part of the conversation, that might.
So if you haven't already, take 5 minutes today and write it down. Not what you want to be able to do, who you want to become. And then every time the practice gets hard, because it will, read it again.
That piece of paper might matter more than any technique we talk about today. Okay, let's talk about the mistakes. Because shadowing is effective, but it's also possible to do it in ways that undermine the whole thing.
Mistake 1. Choosing material that's too advanced.
This is the most common one. Someone decides to shadow a TED Talk on their first day. The speaker is moving at full conversational speed, using nuanced vocabulary, making rapid shifts in topic. The learner gets lost in about 40 seconds and concludes that shadowing doesn't work.
But what they actually proved is that their material was wrong, not their ability. In days 1 through 15 especially, you want content that is clear, paced deliberately, and uses everyday language. Podcast conversations between two people. Dialogue-heavy content, not lectures.
Mistake 2. Shadowing without comprehension.
Yes, some people shadow content they don't actually understand. They're just mimicking sounds. And while mimicking sounds isn't useless, it's far less powerful than shadowing content where you know what you're saying.
Because language learning requires meaning. Your brain forms durable connections when sounds are attached to understanding. Pure phonetic mimicry fades much faster.
So the sequence matters. Listen first for meaning, then follow along with the transcript if you have one, then shadow. That 3-step process is not extra work, it's what makes the work stick.
Mistake 3. Treating shadowing as your only practice.
Shadowing is powerful, but it's one tool. It works best alongside actual speaking, even if that's just talking to yourself out loud, recording yourself, describing your day in English before you go to sleep.
And that last one, recording yourself, is something a lot of people skip because hearing your own voice in a second language is genuinely uncomfortable. But by day 14, if you listen back to your day 1 recording, what you hear is going to surprise you.
Because progress over 14 days is real, measurable, and hearing it in your own voice is a kind of proof that no one else can give you. That recording is evidence, your own evidence, that this works.
So, speak English in 90 days. Is it possible with shadow practice?
Here's my honest answer. 90 days of consistent daily shadowing practice will not make you perfectly fluent. I want to be clear about that. Fluency, real, full, comfortable fluency, takes longer for most people.
But 90 days will absolutely make you someone who speaks English. Someone who reaches for words and finds them. Someone who stays in conversations instead of escaping them. Someone who makes mistakes and keeps going anyway.
And that person, the one who speaks imperfect English without freezing, is infinitely more capable in the real world than the person who has studied perfectly for years and still can't open their mouth.
Because English is not a subject, it's a skill, and skills are built through doing, not through knowing.
The first 15 days of shadowing are about proving to your brain that speaking is possible. Not perfect, possible. And once your brain believes that, once you've got 15 days of evidence that you can do this, 90 days becomes something you can actually imagine reaching.
So here's the challenge, not a complicated one. Tomorrow morning, or right now if you can, find 5 English sentences, simple ones. Say them out loud, say them again, and then do it the next day and the day after that.
Don't wait until you feel ready. Nobody ever feels ready. The practice is what creates the readiness.
And 90 days from now, when someone says, "Hey, how are you?" in English, you're not going to freeze. You're going to answer. And it's going to feel like the most natural thing in the world.
Because you'll have built it, sentence by sentence, day by day. You'll have built it yourself.
That's our conversation for today on the open mic. If something we said landed for you, if you're going to start your shadowing practice because of this episode, we genuinely want to know.
Drop a comment, send us a message. Share this with someone who's been stuck in the studying without speaking loop for too long. You might just give them the push they needed.
And hey, if you found us today and this is the first episode you've heard, there's a lot more where this came from. We talk about this stuff every week.
Until next time, keep your mouth moving. See you soon.
See you soon.